The billionaire smiled after slapping the pregnant nurse. Nurses froze beside the ICU desk while the sharp sound echoed through the hospital hallway. Vanessa Reed stumbled backward, both hands instantly wrapping around her stomach to protect her unborn daughter. Graham Carlisle adjusted the sleeve of his expensive navy coat like nothing important had happened. Less than 24 hours later, federal investigators would raid his corporate headquarters, while financial news stations whispered the same impossible headline across America. The billionaire's empire collapsed overnight. But standing inside that hospital, Graham still believed he had won. If you enjoy emotional billionaire drama stories filled with shocking twists, hidden power, and unforgettable karma, subscribe to Untold Journey Stories and support the channel so we can continue bringing you more powerful stories like this one. Only hours earlier, St. Augustine Medical Center had been running on exhaustion and adrenaline. Rain streaked down the tall Boston windows while heart monitors pulsed through the intensive care unit like nervous ticking clocks. Doctors moved quickly. Families prayed quietly. Nurses carried fear from one room to another without ever letting patients see it. Vanessa Reed carried more than fear. At 34 years old and 7 months pregnant, she had become the calm center of the ICU. Younger nurses trusted her instincts more than hospital administrators. Patients relaxed when they heard her voice. Even tonight, wearing dark green scrubs stretched carefully over her stomach, she continued moving room to room despite the pain tightening through her lower back. Nobody at the hospital knew much about her private life. Vanessa preferred it that way. Nobody knew about the old locked phone hidden beneath winter clothes inside her apartment closet. Nobody knew why a tall man in a charcoal coat sometimes watched the hospital from across the street without ever entering. And nobody knew the dangerous truth Vanessa had spent years trying to escape. Then Graham Carlisle stormed through the ICU doors demanding a bed for a shallow cut on his hand. Vanessa stepped into his path. Graham stared at her coldly before speaking words that made the entire hallway fall silent. "Do you know how easily I can destroy your life?" The hallway went silent after the billionaire spoke, as if even the machines inside the ICU understood something ugly was unfolding beneath the fluorescent lights. Rain pounded the tall hospital windows, while nurses avoided eye contact, pretending to study charts that suddenly blurred in their shaking hands. Vanessa Reed did not step aside. Behind her, a 68-year-old heart patient slept beneath heavy sedation, his chest rising slowly beneath layers of blankets and surgical tubing. Moving him could kill him. Vanessa knew that. And deep down, Graham Carlisle knew it too. He simply did not care. "I'm not asking again," Graham said coldly. "Move somebody." Vanessa folded her arms carefully beneath the curve of her pregnancy. Her dark green scrubs stretched tightly across her stomach as another sharp ache moved through her lower back. "This floor is for critical patients," she answered. "You need to go downstairs." Graham's jaw tightened. The billionaire glanced around the ICU, searching for someone weaker, someone willing to obey him for money or fear. Nobody moved. A young medical intern named Lena Brooks slowly pulled out her phone beneath the reception desk. Her hands trembled as she secretly began recording. Then Graham laughed. It was the kind of laugh powerful men use before ruining lives. "You nurses always think being emotional makes you brave," he sneered. "That's why people like you stay exactly where you belong." The insult burned through the hallway. One nurse lowered her head in shame. Another quietly wiped tears from her face. But Vanessa still refused to move. The billionaire's expression darkened. Then suddenly, violently, his hand crashed across her face. The sound cracked through the ICU like breaking glass. Vanessa stumbled sideways into the counter, both arms wrapping protectively around her unborn daughter as pain flashed across her face. Heart monitors instantly screamed through the unit. Nobody breathed. Near the emergency stairwell, a tall man wearing a charcoal coat slowly lifted his eyes from his phone. And for the first time that night, someone looked genuinely dangerous. The man near the emergency stairwell never raised his voice. He never stepped forward. He simply watched Vanessa struggling to steady herself against the ICU counter while alarms screamed through the unit around her. Beneath the fluorescent lights, the silver wolf ring on his hand glimmered once before disappearing back into the shadows. Then he quietly typed a message into his phone and walked away. Inside the ICU, the damage spread fast. A senior doctor rushed toward Vanessa while two nurses helped her stay upright. Her cheek burned where Graham Carlisle had struck her, but she barely noticed the pain. Her hands remained locked protectively around her unborn daughter. Across the hallway, Lena Brooks stood frozen with her phone still recording. Then the hospital administrators arrived. Dr. Raymond Ellis, chief medical officer of St. Augustine Medical Center, entered the ICU with the forced calm of a man already choosing money over truth. His expensive gray suit looked untouched by the chaos surrounding him. Graham immediately pointed toward Vanessa. "She became aggressive," the billionaire snapped. "Your nurse endangered patients and assaulted me." The lie landed heavily in the silent hallway. Dr. Ellis glanced once at Vanessa's swollen cheek, once at the terrified nurses nearby, then toward Graham Carlisle, the billionaire donor responsible for funding the hospital's newest surgical wing. Fear won. "I'm deeply sorry for this misunderstanding, Mr. Carlisle," Dr. Ellis said smoothly. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "You're firing me?" she whispered. Dr. Ellis avoided her eyes completely. Security escorted Vanessa through the hospital lobby less than 20 minutes later. Rain hammered the streets of Boston as reporters gathered outside after anonymous tips suddenly reached local media stations. By midnight, social media headlines painted the pregnant nurse as unstable and violent. By morning, her bank accounts were frozen. And inside her dark apartment, Vanessa finally opened the old locked phone hidden in her closet. Her hands trembled as she dialed a number she had prayed never to use again. Across the city, inside a glass penthouse overlooking downtown Boston, Adrian Voss closed his eyes the moment he heard Vanessa's voice break on the phone. For years she had fought to build a quiet life far away from the shadows he lived in. She had wanted hospitals instead of violence, peace instead of fear, normal instead of powerful. And now someone had shattered that life in a single night. "You don't have to explain anything," Adrian said calmly. "I already know." The line went silent for several seconds. Then Adrian stood from his chair and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-covered skyline. Beneath the soft lights of the penthouse, the silver wolf ring on his hand reflected like cold steel. 4 phone calls followed. By sunrise, Graham Carlisle's empire had already begun collapsing. The billionaire discovered the first crack during breakfast inside his private club. His black credit card declined in front of investors he had spent years trying to impress. Moments later, his chief financial officer called in panic. 3 offshore accounts had been emptied overnight, not stolen, erased. Within hours, financial news networks exploded with reports of federal investigations tied to Graham's companies. Anonymous leaks exposed tax fraud, bribery, and illegal shell corporations connected to overseas laundering operations. The billionaire's empire collapsed so quickly that even Wall Street analysts struggled to explain it. Meanwhile, inside St. Augustine Medical Center, Dr. Raymond Ellis desperately ordered security teams to delete ICU surveillance footage before investigators arrived. But Lena Brooks had already copied everything onto an encrypted drive hidden inside her locker. Fear spread through the hospital faster than the news itself. That night, Graham attempted to flee Boston aboard his private jet. He never reached the runway. 3 black SUVs emerged from the darkness surrounding the private airfield. Armed men stepped out silently while rain hammered against the pavement. Then Graham saw the silver wolf emblem on one of their jackets. And for the first time in many years, the billionaire looked afraid. Rainwater dripped from Graham Carlisle's expensive coat as the men surrounded him beside the private jet. The billionaire, who once controlled boardrooms with a single phone call, now stood frozen on the dark runway, staring at the silver wolf emblem glowing beneath the airfield lights. By the following morning, every major news station in America carried the same headline: "Billionaire Empire Collapses After Federal Raids." Federal agents stormed Graham's corporate offices before sunrise, while investors abandoned his companies by the hour. Former business partners denied knowing him. Politicians stopped returning his calls. The same media outlets that once praised his success now replayed footage of his downfall on endless rotation. And somewhere beneath all the financial scandals and breaking news banners, the truth about St. Augustine Medical Center quietly began surfacing. The ICU footage leaked online 3 days later. Millions watched the pregnant nurse standing calmly in front of critical patients while Graham Carlisle screamed at her before striking her across the face. Public outrage exploded almost instantly. Dr. Raymond Ellis resigned before the hospital board could officially terminate him. Several executives soon followed. 4 months later, the atmosphere inside St. Augustine felt completely different. Warm sunlight now poured through the maternity ward windows instead of cold fluorescent tension. Vanessa Reed sat peacefully in a hospital bed, holding her newborn daughter against her chest, while soft music played quietly from the television nearby. For the first time in months, her world felt still. Near the doorway, Adrian Voss watched his niece sleeping in silence. The dangerous edge people feared around him seemed gone for the moment, replaced by something softer, human. Vanessa looked up at him and smiled weakly. "You gave me my life back," she whispered. Adrian shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "You survived long enough to take it back yourself." If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell us what you would have done in Vanessa's place. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and support Untold Journey Stories for more emotional drama stories filled with karma, justice, and unforgettable twists.